Hello and welcome to Insightfully Speaking, a podcast from Kardec Group, where we explore spirituality, philosophy, current affairs, and other interesting things from a Spiritist perspective. I'm your host, Adam Osborne, and I'm joined as always by my co-hosts, Anne Sinclair and Humberto Schubert. Today, our guest is Lolita Stein Johnson, and we'll be talking about the rise of AI, a royal coronation, the art of Hilma af Klint, Ukraine, 1 year on, and what we got up to in Assisi. So let's start as always by saying hello to Anne and Humberto. So here we are once again. We have a great set of guests lined up for our episodes of Insightfully Speaking this year. How are you both, and what have you been up to recently?
Hi, Adam. Yes, been very excited as becoming a grandmother, to be honest, and to being present to the arrival of new life on Earth, the new generation coming in. And it's interesting because it just gives you a completely unbiased focus. All you can do is focus on the baby. So that was quite interesting, and I think that we are enjoying the summer starting here in the UK, and we have events that we'll be talking about later on in the program.
Yeah, well, congratulations on the arrival of your granddaughter.
Well, I believe no news can compare to that. It is really the best thing that can happen on this planet, in my opinion. It's the most important and the most meaningful moment in life. But things here have been very busy, and that also brings us to a reflection about the necessity of slowing down a little bit and enjoying nature, life, and trying not to be overwhelmed by the many commitments and the full agenda. And well, basically, we're trying to administrate that. And here in the southern hemisphere, we have a particularly cold winter in Brazil arriving.
Yeah, obviously the opposite of here, where we've just had about 30, 35 degrees in some parts of the UK,
Whoa.
thunderstorms as well. So, yeah, maybe it's time to get a flight. So, I don't customize the heat that well. But Umberto, there's some news about one of your books as well.
Yes, well, we did not publish anything recently, but our book Science of Life After Death was just translated to Portuguese. We have very good news from the publisher, Springer Nature. They are trying to translate the book to German, French, and Spanish too. And due to the relative success of the book for an academic book, a couple thousands of books sold is a considerable success. The publisher also wants to write a second book on the topic, more extensive, and so we are really very excited and very grateful for this last developments regarding the book. Our friend Alexander Moreira presented the book in the World Psychiatry Association recently in the United States, and he reported that people were very, very interested in knowing more about the book and how it was made, and the methodology, and so and so. So we are very, very happy with this considerable success of this project.
I think that Umberto's news there, I feel very excited about it, very motivated, because it's bringing together science and philosophy, and it's creating space to discuss things that might have been sitting in the realm of religion and things like that, or cults, and just bring it into a more academic environment so that things can be discussed and knowledge can be disseminated and organized in different ways. I find it sort of very encouraging that it has had good acceptance.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I think especially now in this post-COVID era that we're in, I think more people who are accepting these kinds of thoughts, these kinds of material. So I'm sure all the other languages will be an equally good success. So today we have with us as a guest Lolita, and to introduce her, Lolita Stein Johnson is coordinator of the Spiritist group of Brighton and Hove, and is also a worker for the Solidarity Spiritist Society. She embraces whatever life throws at her as an opportunity of self-discovery. Lolita's disappeared.
Which she's doing now.
Lolita, how are you? We've finally got you here. We've had some technical issues, but we're finally up and running. Lolita, how are you?
I am very well, thank you. And thank you very much for having me here today. And you said what I have been up to today. Well, today is my husband's birthday. So we had a lovely cake earlier on, which was very delicious. So I am not hungry at the moment. So I am here with you.
Yeah. That's great. Well, thank you for being with us. Well, let's get started with the first topic. And I thought it's only right that we touch on the more difficult topic first, which is just to briefly reflect on what's been happening in the last year in regards to Ukraine. We know that the situation is still going on. So I wanted to just get your thoughts, everyone, quickly about what you have seen change over this past year, any positive things you've seen happen, especially within your local communities.
If I may start, noticed. Well, I actually met people from Ukraine that actually have moved to Brighton and Hove, and I met a couple of people by chance at the bus stop, and obviously we were talking, and she was explaining, especially the lady, because she was the only one who could speak English, and she was explaining that she was a surgeon, and her husband was a surgeon as well, and they were a bit concerned that they could not use their abilities in the UK. They had been in Germany, and there they could actually fully function, and they were actually helping the medical community there with their knowledge, and especially because they could speak the language of the refugees. And they were a bit concerned that they couldn't do the same in the UK. So, and that was about 2-3 months ago.
Yeah, I think that kind of thing's a shame, especially as we're having a crisis of a lack of doctors
Yeah.
and surgeons here in the UK. But yeah, there's definitely so many cases of similar things happening throughout the country with these refugees. But Anne, Humberto, what about yourselves?
I think that for me, the war in Ukraine is a very sad reminder of our level of evolution on this planet. That we're still not able to resolve our differences in a non-violent way. Um, I feel for the people who are suffering directly, both sides of the border, whoever is caught up. I know that there is a manipulation of the media and the different interests and all that kind of thing. But I just look at the human factor, and people are caught in the crossfire backwards and forwards. But what is that telling us? That they reflect our state as a humanity on this planet, that we are trying to move forwards, but we're still using the methods of the past to resolve our differences. And if we, as a human community on the planet, if we can't try and find a way to negotiate a different way of resolving our differences, we can't find peace for all. Because I find that the war in Ukraine and Russia is a war in Europe. So for those of us who live in Europe, it's on our doorstep. There is war going on in all parts of the world, but as it's not on our doorstep, perhaps it doesn't affect us so directly. So this one is bringing that reality very close to home. And it reminds me of that, what is in the Spirit's body of knowledge, that if my brother or my sister suffers, how can I find happiness? because we are all interconnected. So it doesn't mean for me to go around being depressed all day long because of this, but just to think, yeah, there are people who are suffering. So I can still have joy in my life, but I need to be thinking about what is my contribution to world peace, and what is my participation in the volatility and the aggression that still exists around the planet, because all of us give out our energy. And what energy are we giving out? Are we contributing to the war in the sense of contributing our aggression, or are we contributing to the efforts of peace and light? And that's a very individual thought for each one of us to be reflecting on, how we can be, because we are all in a way responsible for all events on this planet, including those that make us feel quite uncomfortable.
That was very philosophical, and I'm also especially concerned with the fact that human beings are sensationalist and immediatist by nature. So as the war was moved from the center of the stage to a very secondary position, people stop caring about those in need and those who desperately need support from many sorts. And I think we have to be especially conscious that as the war progresses even more and more, the general needs of this population will only increase, and we have to bring them back to the news again and again.
Yeah. Yeah, and Lolita, sorry, you were saying something before, but I did speak over you. But do you remember what it was that you were about to say?
No. It was pretty much on the same. It's a shame that it has taken backstage at this time, and it's not on the news as much as it used to. It's as if it doesn't concern us anymore, and it's
Yeah,
which is not true. And like Anne said, it's part. We are co-creators, and it's part of wherever we live. And it's on our desktop because we are closer.
but I think we can take comfort in knowing that there's so many communities that have embraced all the refugees and helping them so much. Local food banks, clothes banks as well, giving so much support. So yes, these things are happening. It is here in Europe, but I think there is probably a lot of support that we don't see as well. So even though we may not be seeing so much about what's the conflict going on, we don't necessarily also see the good things. But let's just hope that, soon it can be resolved. But we never know.
Yeah. And just to continue the conversation I had with this couple is, they were very happy that they managed to flee the country in time, but they obviously had a lot of family is still in the country in Ukraine, and they were very concerned. And when you talk to them, it's like it does bring it very close to your door.
Yeah.
You can't hide.
No, absolutely not. Well, let's change tone a little bit. And the item I wanted to talk about now, which has been a hot topic over the past few months, is the rise of tools powered by artificial intelligence, such as DALL-E and Midjourney, the AI tools which can create realistic images based on just a few words, and ChatGPT, which has been used by people around the world to write academic papers, computer software, poetry, and even podcast scripts, as well as creating songs and lyrics in the style of specific people. And there are many questions raised about the ethics of using such tools, especially as we can't be sure as to where the original information which was used to create these has actually come from. And there's also about the fact that there's a lack of regulation over the content being created and how it's being used. Cases that have been made public were pieces of music believed to be of well-known artists being released on major platforms and gaining millions of downloads, only to then be revealed that it was all created by artificial intelligence, without the knowledge of the musicians in question. And also photos and artwork all being generated by AI, winning top prizes without anyone suspecting that no camera or paintbrush even, was used in their creation. What are your thoughts on these tools? Have any of you had a chance to use them or seen anything created by them?
Well, this is a very urgent topic for teachers and lecturers, since some works are difficult to separate from the human-made, or to the legitimate academic works. And to some extent, we can discern which, if we carefully read it, we can discern which papers are artificially made and which are products of our students. But at some point, it will be impossible. And that raises a legitimate concern too about how should we proceed. Should all exams be presential, or should we develop new methods of evaluating the progress of the students? So it's a very concrete problem now in education. And very soon, if people start using it as a cheating method, we can predict more serious social outcomes from this educational problem.
Did you want to speak, Lolita, or should I go first?
Go for it. Go for it.
Yeah. So I must say, I am one of those persons that perhaps are slightly older in this group, and I have seen the development of technology in my lifespan, from phone calls that required, a telephonist to complete the connection, to, mobile phones that we can't breathe without. And I think that the advancement of technology, like all advancement of science, I think it can't be stopped as such. And anything that advances very quickly and doesn't have the equivalent sort of moral guidance with it tends to have a little bit of chaos around its initial presentation. And I remember even like in the beginning here in the UK of the transplantation of organs, of human organs, it was all like a lot of worries about all the criminality that might be around it and all these kind of things. But eventually the Parliament caught up with it. They set very firm legislation around it. They had lots of ethical debates, and nowadays, at least in the UK, it works within good ethical frameworks. I think artificial intelligence will need debate as a society, will need debate in Parliament, to think where does the legislation need to sit, because some people might be with not so good intentions, but progress is inevitable. Is that we just need to catch up and think, okay, how can we make this be used for good, and put it at the service of our progress. It might be just thinking about Humberto and education, and remembering my daughter when she was doing her GCSEs here, thinking that in the UK she'll say, "Oh, our educational system is not fit for purpose. It's creating people for the 19th century industrial revolution, and we are in a different situation now." But thinking about, does education need to think about what are we doing in terms of education, what it means, what is the evaluation, the testing methods, what do they want to achieve? I am not a teacher, please don't shoot me down. I'm just putting it out as a philosophical discussion, because sometimes, although it creates sort of some anxieties, perhaps it also creates a space for something new, a different way of learning and being evaluated, whether your learning can qualify you for this job or that job, or this task or that task. I don't know. I don't have the answer. It is scary when you look at it like that. We all worry because we know there are people always who are looking to cheat or to make money, and with evil intent. But I think it brings us to a point where, as humans, we need to question, you know, what kind of society we want, how do we want this to work for us, to contribute positively, and where do we sit with our own human creativity? Can artificial intelligence only rehash what somebody's put in there, or can they be truly creative like an individual spirit? And I think that it might bring the spirit into the conversation of what makes us human. We're not robots, we're not machines, but we have been used as machine pieces in the Industrial Revolution, like working the machines and things like that. So maybe it's about that creativity, that individuality coming through and showing why we're different than the artificial intelligence or not. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being naive, but just that's where I'm thinking at the moment.
Yeah, and I'm like you. I saw the whole technology, the increase of technology. I remember the first time of being in London, and the only way I could communicate is to the phone booth that we could find, or if you had a telephone, obviously, at home, or even when the mobiles started, they were huge. I think we always need to remember that the way I see it is, if you have a machine, let's call it a machine, whichever way, artificial intelligence, it needs input, and who actually gives the input are us. So whoever is giving the input actually has got the responsibility, like you were saying, and the responsibility of what do you want to achieve with it. If we look into the history of robotic cybernetics, we go as far as 1200s, when the first ideas of robots actually came across. So if we look at Isaac Asimov, if we look at who they called father of robotics, what they created, what they had in mind, and we look at the history, and like Anne said, we are probably scared is the history, but we also, like Anne said, we need to look at the future, the next generations that are coming. When we were kids, we wouldn't think about having a mobile. We wouldn't think about asking Siri, Alexa for answers for questions or stuff like that. That would never have crossed our minds. The generation that is coming, the kids that are coming, or even your granddaughter, for instance, my children, daughters in Australia, they are already ahead. The technology that for us is still a bit scary. They just sit down and just do it. I remember about 5 years ago sitting my 2-year-old son of my niece, who actually lives in the countryside, who had no access to any computer at all. I sat him on my lap with the iPad, just doing sounds of animals, and in a couple of seconds, he moved my hand away, and he started to use the iPad as if he had been using it for a long time. So if we see this kind of reaction in kids, we need to think about the next generation. We need to think about the generations coming out. And like Ed said, yes, it's going to happen. A lot of things happen over the years. And in many ways, it probably hasn't happened yet because we are too scared. I'm a sci-fi person. I love Data on Star Trek, for instance, just to name one in a few. I love Star Trek, and the idea of having a future maid, which is a robot who's going to cook for me or cleaning the house, I welcome it. Come on, kind of thing. But obviously there is all the issues, like you were bringing up, like in education, and it's so easy. For instance, I used the chat box, and I asked him to actually do me a 10-line poem talking about Hilma and Percival. So he put Ilma's quest and and Percival's quest for the Grail together in a poem, and I was going, I couldn't have done that, not in the same way as it did it. So there are things that are obviously we always have got to look at the pros and cons of any technology that comes in our way, but a lot of things we are already using. You're already using, if some of us are using Siri, Alexa, it's there. It's on the cars. It's everywhere already. And we don't really realize. It's just having that one more step, like you say, doing lyrics, doing a painting. But if we think, for instance, if you program, if you are an artist and work with illustration, for instance, I need to do 10 pieces of illustration, for instance, and they need to be done in 2 or 3 days. I can't do it. But if I have an artificial intelligence and I can program my type of way of drawings, a way of thinking, of creativity in it, it will be done in what? 1 hour? And I can do something else. Meanwhile, I can still use my creativity because I input all that creativity. I put a lot of things of myself into the machine. So the machine will be doing still something of me, from me, not by itself. And the big question is being a sentient being or not? That is the big question that people have to ask.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think you touched on some important points there. That yes, in the background, just like we're talking about the issue of Ukraine, in the background, we don't see about all the positive things that have already happened thanks to artificial intelligence over the past don't know how many years. So, for example, cures and vaccines and medicines that would have taken years to develop, but thanks to AI, no, obviously they've gone through all the correct clinical trials and proven that these things were found quickly. Methods for detecting cancer, for example, have been increased a lot thanks to the use of AI. But yeah, it's more a case of as well of where does the responsibility lie for any potential misuse or harm caused by all of these tools? And I think you said it correctly, Lolita. It depends on who's actually putting in that command in the first place, because information about making anything we can find anywhere, but who's the one actually accessing that information?
Well, if we even think of the atomic bomb, for instance, it wasn't created for that, and someone used it for it. It's the same way we're going. So whoever is creating, the creator, needs to have the responsibility, and whoever is going to use it. And Humberto said something very important, because, like I said, I asked for a poem. I can ask probably for a whole paper on a subject. But as a teacher, sometimes, depending on how close you are to the student, you will probably see through the language that is being used, which was Humberto was saying as well. You probably will see the type of language that the student is using, the formation of sentences, because of the way they perform inside the classroom, and the way they convey their opinions in the classroom. So you might have a hint, but that would mean a lot of work for the teachers as well, and have that continuing insight on each one of the, I don't know, 100 students sometimes in the classroom in a university.
Yeah. Well, there was an interesting thing I read a couple of months ago about a actually a Spiritist research group in Brazil, who used ChatGPT to create so-called mediumistic messages created by GPT in the style of certain spirits. And they said that what it created was very, very similar. And obviously the big concern is, what if someone then starts to publish that and say, oh yes, this medium received these messages and here it is, here's the proof. So it's, I think, obviously take it with a pinch of salt as well.
No, oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Humberto.
Yeah, I think it's certainly happening. We have a large number of mediocre authors who are using artificial intelligence to boost their production, and it is very hard to root out and to avoid, and it's hard to be prevented. So in the following years, what I think is going to happen is that we will have to develop methods to detect who is doing such things, and to which extent we want to identify this as a misbehavior, for example, because to a certain extent too, people who are able in using these artificial intelligences, they are performing um, uh, competently some tasks.
And Humberto, talking still in education, I remember when I was doing my master's and the university introduced a system where we were starting to go digital and handing in our dissertations digitally. And your dissertation would go into a software where would pick up plagiarism straight away. I mean, come on, we've been doing things already. And if you start thinking about it, there's so much already out there that we don't really realize because we started to get things for granted.
Well, I just bringing into the conversation what is, the value of individuality, of creative force that each one of has, because when you think about the spirit in terms of psychological terms and the individuation, as said by Jung, we are all individual spirits. Although we might have similarities with one another, nobody is the same. We are all totally individual because we bring all that individual history, that individual process. And so I'm just thinking in terms of artificial intelligence and armies of artificial intelligence, doing the jobs and doing this and that. So what is the value of the human being, of that individual, that is unique individual living on Earth, having an experience? So I do think it would be eventually thought-provoking, because how much what do we need to create, what do we need to produce in the world? And like you were saying before about robotics and taking away, this has been happening for ages through the industrialization, taking away some of the jobs that were done manually became done by machines, and then more like big industry, they're done by robots as well. Less and less human beings running factories, just doing a few things. So what is the purpose of the human being on Earth? And these are kind of the questions that I think as humans on Earth, we will have to ask ourselves. Even like to say, new generation arriving, what's their life plan? What are they coming in with as an objective for their incarnation and things like that? And it might be that things that are of a material nature that have occupied us in the past will be released for us to develop more time for personal relationships, connecting with ourselves. And it could, I don't know how the future will be. I'll have to come back and see. But yeah, I just feel that it for me sometimes it's almost like I'm living in an age of science fiction, and I think, oh my gosh, how did I get here? I was talking about when I was a kid. There used to be this cartoon called the Jetstones, and it was like in the future, and they had like a little watch that had like they could speak to their family members on the watch, la la la, little like a little
Hmm.
mini TV would be on their watch, and then they would and then they appear on a TV at home. I mean, Apple was already
Yeah,
the
Yeah,
Apple Watch and things, and
exactly.
like in those days when I was a child or a young person, I'll say, ha ha ha, that would never happen.
Yeah, well,
Happen in
exactly.
my lifetime.
Jetsons, Dick Tracy, Star Trek, they all, in a way, influenced the future. But yeah, let's see what happens with how AI progresses. But let's move to another topic now, because here in the UK we've had a couple of very special events which resulted in huge celebrations. I am, of course, not just talking about the Eurovision Song Contest being hosted in Liverpool, but the coronation of King Charles III and Queen Camilla. Now, the event, which took place in Westminster Abbey just over a month ago, was watched by millions of people around the world, where their majesties followed age-old traditions in a ceremony filled with symbolism, songs, prayer, and ancient rituals. During the 3-day celebratory weekend, the entire country was given incentive to have street parties, where households got together for picnics and barbecues, sharing food and spending time together. A special concert was held in the gardens of Windsor Castle, and a day of charity was arranged where people offered to volunteer at local organisations helping community projects. Now, did any of you watch the coronation or take part in any specific activities over that weekend? And especially for Humberto, what are your thoughts about these events?
May I start?
Please.
Well, from here, I I knew about one or other factor because of my British friends or friends in Britain, but in the news, the central topic was the splendour of our president, who which achieved monarchical levels, and that was a small shock for some. In Brazil, we have very mixed feelings about that. It's a very French-oriented political culture, so most people are strongly against monarchy, and many people even hate it as a sin or as an evil structure. And so, of course, it's not always connected or associated with any knowledge about how modern and constitutional monarchies actually work. But anyway, it is not a topic that we discuss very much, and not unbiased.
It's interesting. Before I came to live in this country, the monarchy didn't mean anything to me. I've been living here for 30 years now. And I watched the coronation because I was interested in the symbolism, in the ritual. They said the last one happened before I was born. So I said, okay, let's see what's it all about. So I, from a historical, anthropological kind of point of view, I was interested to observe. But I was moved, and I was surprised that I was moved. But I think I was trying to analyze why did I feel moved by it, and I think in part it's just thinking about the history of humanity. So in the United Kingdom, is society is being organized as a monarchy for a long time. Being a monarch doesn't mean that you're a good person; just means you have the power. Of course, nowadays it's slightly different. But it just kind of resonated all those centuries of history that's gone past. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, we're in the 21st century and we're still replicating this in some way. But I thought it was almost like it was evocating the past and bringing it, saying, this is where we come from. This is how I felt it. This is where we come from. It's different nowadays. And I don't think that there'll probably be another similar one, because I don't think it will survive much longer because of many factors. But I did feel moved, and I did feel that the religious aspect of it sort of surprised me, because I kind of forgot that it was all about, you being chosen by God to be royal, blah, blah. But on the other hand, if we think about Spiritism and our incarnations, we come into our incarnation with a purpose, with a task. And if our incarnation is, say, I want to be in the leadership of the people of the United Kingdom, if you can be born into the royal family and you can have that position of leadership in the United Kingdom. So it is not by chance that people are born into situations or families like that. And I know that a lot of people think, oh, it must be lovely, a bit like Disney, being princess, prince, and all these kind of carriages and horses and all this fairy tale. But I do think that their life is quite hard, quite tough. And I do think that they feel the weight of the responsibility, most of them, and how easy it could be to fail. because there are so many people looking at you, witnessing, like, looking and checking on you. And I think in the United Kingdom, at least at this stage, is still a unifying force. And maybe particularly because of the history of the two world wars and Queen Elizabeth, that enduring presence, it is something that brings us together. Because the politics, they change all the time. One party, another party, this one, that one. But that one, the royal family persists. When they say, like, the Queen Elizabeth, how many prime ministers did she shake hands with? How many American presidents did she shake hands with? And she was always there. So that feeling of something that's always there is kind of comforting in some way, of like some stability or something. That's the kind of feeling I got from it. Yeah, it was strange. I thought it was in a way an anachronism because it was from the past, but on the other way, it evoked me, it brought me, say, this is where we've come to. What will the future be? I don't know. This is where we've come to. And I thought, yeah, I enjoyed watching it. I enjoyed the people having parties in the street, although I didn't participate. I didn't really feel it that way. But I do think it was good that they chose a day for doing charity, for people to do acts of charity. I think that was a good way to call people out to do something good. And of course, I enjoyed the bank holiday, the extra bank holiday.
Always a
Very
good
much.
thing.
Yeah, I thought that the Day of Charity was pretty much in line with Charles' work on environment and all sorts of charity works that he does. And I hope that sets a tone of the years to come of the work that he's going to be concentrating, which probably will be a bit different because times are different than Queen Elizabeth. And like you, we didn't go to any street parties as well, but we did watch it. We did watch, and we were quite pleased to know that even our granddaughter in Australia watched it, and she wants a crown. She wants to come to London. They're coming next year, hopefully. So she wants to go to the Tower Bridge. She wants to look at everything. She is 5 years old, so she's very much interested. But it was, like Anne said, it was an historic moment that, us who have been living, I've been living for nearly 30 years in this country, and the royal family is part of this country, is part of our lives in this country. It's that historic moment. Yes, I didn't go to London, but it was much better watching it from home on the telly. But it didn't take away that celebration and that overwhelming feeling of what exactly was going on historically in this country, in this world.
Yeah, it was a really special weekend, and because I grew up and have lived in and around Windsor for the majority of my life, it's always special when there's anything good relating to the royal family, all these kinds of pomp and ceremony. For me, I love it all. So for me, it was a great weekend. And yes, the extra day off work, so it was good. It was good to relax. But
But just let me add, sorry, Adam, it's let me add, and like Anne, I was born in this country, and neither has Humberto, but I was always interested in watching the movies to do with Britain and the Templars and the kings and the queens, hence me coming to England rather than going to America. So I was always drawn by this country in one way or another, hence I'm here.
yeah. So let's move on to the next topic. And there is a film which I thought would be good to talk about, which I noticed very recently. And it's a biographic called Hilma, which is about the Swedish painter Hilma af Klint, who received inspiration and instruction for her art through mediumship, having studied Spiritism in Sweden in the late 1800s. Now, for people who have not heard of her, Hilma created many very large pieces of art which depict various aspects of life from a spiritualistic point of view, and were considered the first pieces of abstract Western art. And when I say large, each piece is about 2 to 3 meters tall. Now, the film of Hilma was directed by Lasse Hallström and stars Lena Olin, Tora Hallström, and Lily Cole, as well as many other great actors, and covers most aspects of Hilma's life with a strong focus of her studies of Spiritism and the mediumship meetings that they used, which led her to create these large pieces of art. And in 2019, there was also a documentary called Beyond the Visible, Hilma af Klint, which also looks at these pieces of mediumistic art. And right now, there is a exhibition at the Tate Modern in London where many of these pieces are on display. So, have any of you heard of Hilma before or seen her artwork? And what do you think about art created through mediumship?
I'll start with the easy question. I, I am not an art connoisseur. I hadn't heard of her before. Thank you for introducing her, Adam. I am going to go to the Tate Gallery to see. I am intrigued and I'm interested. But I think that I would just say, in general terms, I mean, not just him. Of course, she was overtly interested in the spiritual world and her mediumship. But you say that a lot of artists are moved, influenced, and inspired by the spiritual realm in their art, whether they know it or not. And I think it's when people say, that their inspiration comes, and quite often, it could be more, they could be painting, but their spirit guides, their spirit friends could be influencing them as well, and guiding them. So I think it's a work of collaboration. Maybe if some people are artists, they're going to hate me for saying this, but it is I think that for all forms of art, like writers sometimes they say they pick up the pen and they write furiously. I remember the story of Dickens saying that he wrote the story. The characters of his stories would come and sit on a chair in front of him and tell him the story, tell my story, and he would be writing quickly, and they're telling their story. And so I think that the motivation, all forms of art, they do have an interconnection with the spiritual realm, because we are spiritual beings. We are just temporarily in the body, and we might have forgotten that we are spiritual beings, but we live interconnected with the whole spiritual world.
I was personally touched by how ahead of her time she was. She misunderstood, as often we are, but not as much as she was. Women not being accepted as artists as such, and the way she had to, and her final moment, having this idea the world is not prepared for it yet. Just wait, just wait. It's like we are not prepared, AI yet, for artificial intelligence yet. So we need to wait. Maybe another 20 years as well.
And it takes great wisdom just to calm down and wait, because usually when you have the urge to make something, to change the world, you don't want to slow down and just administrate your frustration and wait for another century to be understood. So remarkable character by all means and aspects we could consider. And it is particularly interesting that her work shows us or remind us how diverse and rich mediumship can be, because she did not convey obvious and clear meaning through her works. And because it's abstract art, we can question ourselves, what were these spirits or the spiritual world trying to transmit through that? Because it's extremely hard to understand or to make clear sense of it. And she herself say that, well, it's not something that I want to tell, but something that I see. I just see it, and I have to express what I see and the way I'm seeing it. And I think it is very interesting as a tool to change our mentality, to change the way we interpret reality.
Yeah. And for me, I think it was so great to know that one of these people who was only recognized just recently as being a pioneer of abstract art is someone who had actually studied Spiritism itself, not just going to a spiritualist church, but actually going to a Spiritist study group in the late 1800s in Sweden. And it's good because many of us don't always have so much understanding of the Spiritist movement around the world, but to know that this was an influence for her, I think is a brilliant thing.
As always, we have spirits who come who are ahead of their time because they're breaking the molds, as Humberto said. They're pushing us forward. And even perhaps by participating in a spiritist mediumship meeting, she's breaking the mold as well, pushing things forwards, breaking the boundaries. And we always have, if we look amongst us, sometimes mostly they are misunderstood. But then here we are, like you said, 100 years later. I think, oh yeah, and so on. But what is 100 years in terms of, the life of a spirit? It's interesting, this breaking of boundaries and the molds of what. Even if you think about, the Impressionists and things like that, which are so popular nowadays, and everybody loves it, thinks they're so pretty pictures. They were not welcome at the time when they first appeared because they didn't conform. And it just came into my mind as well when I was in Perugia recently. I went to see an exhibition about one of the first artists of the Renaissance. And it was quite interesting because he's an artist that he lived through the end of like sort of the medieval art and into the Renaissance. And they had like pictures, like he has the same motif and he has painted it in different ways. And it's just so impacting to see how they were putting emotion into the Renaissance and how they were using architecture as a way of controlling the environment and the world. And it was saying at the time, those first pictures, they were scandalous because the characters showed emotion or sensuality, and that was not allowed before. And so it was like, whoa, revolutionary. So when you think about this, lots of times artists are pushing the boundaries. They're creating new space for us to have a wider understanding. But if we are coming into it, we're thinking, oh, this shouldn't be allowed, or this is too much. It doesn't fit the rules of the day. But they just open up new opportunities for us to perceive beyond what the establishment of the time.
Yeah, well, imagine if Hilma had access to AI at the time, who knows what would have been created. Lolita, let's talk a bit about yourself and your group and some of your projects. So what can you tell us about the Spiritist group of Brighton and Hove? When did it start and what are the activities that you currently do?
Well, believe it or not, I actually know the date it started officially. It was 15th of May 2001 that the group started. So it's been going for a long time. It was actually founded by Elsa Rossi, who is now in Brazil, and Publio, who is also in Brazil. I took over about 2010. That not as a coordinator. The coordinator was a bit later because I was kind of still being introduced to Spiritism and trying to understand and stuff like that, up to the point that one day I said, okay, look, let's stop and come on, be serious about this. Do you want this or not? So I started to obviously study it more intensely. And it also so we are a very small group. We still online. We never went face to face after COVID because we have got people that actually are living abroad at the moment. They used to live here in Brighton and Hove. So we've got a person that is always calling from Brazil, one in Ireland, another one in Scotland. So we're quite diverse. So we're probably about 6, 7 people most of the time. sometimes only 4. It doesn't matter because we are surrounded by other spirits helping us to do the studies. I also work very closely with Solidarity in London, and my work with them is what we call theme studies, which is a topic, something that is troubling people. For instance, we normally do 10 weeks, and we talk about one subject. For instance, the last one we did was about anxiety. A lot of people are suffering from anxiety. So we look at what exactly is bringing up that anxiety, and then we go into the codification books. We look into Joanna de Ângelis. So it's the other way around. Instead of bringing the books to us, we look at what is troubling us and then go for guidance into the codification and into the books. We've been doing this since COVID started, so we just, let's say, 3 years. And I mean, as a person, I can say that I changed quite a lot. Obviously, I've been doing quite a lot, all the studies with Gelson, studies with Joanna de Ângelis and all sorts. And obviously, that kind of opens your horizon and your thinking, and you go more and more inwards rather than outwards, and going the other way around, and questioning a lot, questioning your actions, questioning your thoughts. So it's a path to auto-discovery, and those groups are helping quite a lot. I also, not as a facilitator, but as a participant, I am with a group from Sweden. They also do these kind of studies. So I'm there as a participant, not as a facilitator. So it's quite nice to kind of open up to other groups around Europe, around the globe, and stuff like that. And I think that's about it from us down here.
No, that's great to hear. And I think definitely because of the pandemic, many groups have sort of joined together because they've taken the opportunity of online technology, or Zoom meetings, Skype, or whatever, to be able to go, oh yeah, look, we're doing this, let's join together. And you mentioned about a study which we'll talk about in just a minute, because it links to another topic we might talk about in just a few moments. But I was told that you have an artistic side to you as well, that you make some cards and that the proceeds go to good causes.
It does, actually, it does. It happened because I had quite a massive health issues. I had 2 minor strokes, and I also was diagnosed with a congenital heart problem. And during my recovery, I needed something that I felt good about. So I draw my whole attention to creating cards. It started with Christmas cards, and there is this. The Samaritans have an operation called Christmas Box, or I think they renamed this as Samaritan's Purse operation now.
Yeah.
What is this? Is people fill in shoe boxes. It started with shoe boxes, or shoebox Christmas operation, something like that. And I used to, when I used to go more often to Solidarity every time at Christmas, we used to get together 2 or 3 weekends and literally fill up shoe boxes that we're going to send to the Samaritans, who then we're going to send around the world. As I could not go, we had the pandemic, and I could not go personally because of health issues. I kind of felt I need to do something. It started with selling the cards, and so any money that I get from any cards that I make, that I create, or box cards and stuff like that I create, they all go to the Samaritans for this specific event that they create. What I also do, because I can't go to London and help with the groups to actually put the boxes together, So like last year, 3 different groups made about 300 boxes each group. And what I do, I make cards especially for them to put into those boxes. And the boxes, those cards, the message is written by the children of the Spiritist group. So it's more or less the same age as people are actually receiving. So it's a personal message from the kids to other kids around the world.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing just to clarify the purpose of these boxes. It's not just shoving things into a box. It's they're going and they're filled with like toys and sweets, clothes and things, and they go all around the world, don't they?
They do. They do, and it's quite touching when you see the videos of kids actually receiving the boxes. Obviously not yours, but similar boxes and stuff like that. And Samaritans actually encourage people to actually put messages so that the person just only receive a box, but there is a message from someone that actually put some effort, put some thought into what's going into the box. So that makes a bit more personal.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Well done for doing that. No, it's always heartwarming to know that people contribute to all these things that can raise a smile, give a smile to someone who, even though we may never see them, they're going to receive it and they go, "Ooh, okay, ooh, a card as well. Wow."
And it is exactly that because because when you are creating, and we were talking about it, you get inspired, don't you? And a card or you can't put a price on something that you do. I don't use machines. I know friends that use machines that do like if we're talking about like, again AI, artificial intelligence, kind of, you just say to the machine, I want 10, I don't know, bunnies of that size, and no, I am the one that is going to cut, it's going to make the whole collage, it's going to go, so it's not going to be perfect because it's totally handmade. And normally if I use the machine, it would take me what, 5-10 minutes. But for me to do the whole thing, sometimes it's a whole day, and you could never put a price on it. But is the creative it, is the dedication, is the energy that you put it. And sometimes when I get very tired, I just remember, oh, come on, it's going to bring a smile on someone's face, and that's it. That's enough for me.
Brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. Now, there's one more thing I'd love to be able to talk about, and I know that Humberto's been quite quiet because this isn't something that he took part in, unfortunately. But Anne, Lolita, tell us about what we got up to in Assisi.
Ooh, where do we start?
Yeah. So if I just introduce it, we had a get together in Assisi. Was it last month or the month before? I can't remember now. Quite recently, and it was the first gathering of the family of Joanna de Ângelis in Assisi. So this was an idea that had been brewing for a little while and took off, and it was organized, very well organized. And what it meant, there were people from around Europe, there were people from Brazil, and we all met for a couple of days in Assisi, in a place that was very Franciscan, at least where I stayed. The rooms were very simple. There was no TV, there was no Wi-Fi, just a bed with a blanket kind of thing, very simple breakfast, which was really nice in order to I just told my family, look, there's going to be no Wi-Fi. I just like almost like a retreat. And in this fabulous setting, which is the city of Assisi, which is a completely preserved medieval town, but greater than the buildings and the alleyways and the views over the valley is the spiritual energy of the place, which is quite unique. It is a place of pilgrimage. People go there with the intention of pilgrimage, but I think that I mean, I'm not a Catholic, so not really sort of into the saints or anything, but I do know about the life of Saint Francis and his connection to nature and his connection to joy, the joy of life. And you feel that in the atmosphere. You feel his presence in the atmosphere. I could feel it. And if you pray, it was very easy to connect to your spiritual friends and benefactors. It's like it's almost like the barrier between the material and the spiritual life is thinner there, if you could say that. And even one person said, and I kind of agree, that on top of the burial place of Saint Francis, which might or might not have his bones there, but it is a place of pilgrimage where people go to pray, to ask, to thank. It's a very special place, and I sat there for a long while doing my prayers, and so easily you could feel like a portal of light in that place opening above that burial place. And you can just feel like the spiritual presence coming to assist everyone who's coming there with whatever their troubles are or their gratitude is. A very special place in the core of Italy, which it takes us back to a time, in the Middle Ages. And when you think about Francis and Claire, and how was the life of people in those days, and the power of the symbol of the things that they did. And I found it very relevant to nowadays to just, you know, release, take off the excess, the things. It's like to reveal your true spiritual nature and reconnect to that energy. It was something like that, and it was really lovely. So we had studies and talks, but more important than anything, we had meeting up with brothers and sisters that have similar kind of interests. So we call ourselves, let's say, the family of Joanna de Ângelis. So we say in Spiritism that they are like the spiritual families, and a lot of us kind of feel connected to this particular spirit. So we say like we belong to her spiritual family. So when we meet people, we feel in some way connected. So that's why we call it the family of Joanna de Ângelis. And of course, she had that important reincarnation there in Assisi as well. I'll let Lolita say something before I hog up the whole time.
No, I don't really have that much to say anymore. But like Anna was saying, Anna was saying, there were two things that touched me personally. Is the feel of the energy that was there. It was gentle. It was strong. It was really, really strong, but strong in a sense of being gentle, affectionate. You just felt involved with it in a way that is very, very difficult to describe, because like I said, it was amorous, it was sweet, it was soft, but so intense at the same time. And you didn't need very much. And it's a lot to walk up. And I can't believe how many stairs I actually did walk with all the health conditions that I have. I really walked. There was no way that you could move around, that you can actually move around the system without going up. And I had a joke like saying, you're going up, even when you're going down, you were going up. Because the feeling that you had around everywhere in that, little village, town, whatever you want to call it, but it seemed so huge. And also, it was so easy to feel the presence of so many different spirits.
Yes, Assisi itself, wonderful, beautiful, picturesque location, but not great for those of us who have mobility issues, I have to say. We're joking before that perhaps maybe next time we have to get an electric wheelchair or scooter to move around next time. I didn't see any Vespers, but that's another thing. But Humberto, you haven't had the opportunity of being to Assisi, have you?
Not yet, but these were very beautiful testimonies, and I can only envy the privilege of being there with a group that was in symphony and in harmony with this atmosphere. And I have to praise the initiative, because everything we can do to stimulate people remembering and cultivating the high ideals and ideas of this noble and moral spirit, Joanna de Ângelis, is worth. I think we have to have more opportunities to give Joanna de Ângelis the total emphasis that she deserves.
Yeah, it was a great event, and obviously there were people from the who were doing the psychological courses based on the works of Joanna de Ângelis, having that opportunity to be with people from all around the world. There's quite a lot of people from quite a lot of countries who are there, and to be able to see them and share these experiences. And yes, a very Franciscan environment. The food was very Franciscan as well, but wonderful. And we know that next year the plan is for it to be in Germany, but let's see. It should be good fun. Should definitely be good fun.
Yeah, and although we said the accommodation was very simple, we didn't need more than that because we were so busy, taking into our hearts the whole city, and also being surrounded by people that we had seen only online, surrounded by all the speakers that we had a kind of form a rapport with them, but never really seen them personally. So it kind of contributed. We didn't need anything else. All we needed was a bed to go to sleep. That's it.
Yeah, and it's like I said, I think that the feeling of a spiritual retreat, I think, was helpful because you don't need to worry about anything. You just the bed is there, the food is there. You just have to worry about meeting up with friends and going for a walk and listening to another talk and brewing ideas. Brewing ideas. I think it was very fertile. Lots of people were thinking of different ideas and getting inspiration. And we need that,
And
especially
very
out of that busy life of so many commitments and just taking a few days off to let's refocus.
yeah, and we must say again, very well organized.
Yeah,
Very well.
absolutely.
Well, Germany I know very well, and I bet the food will be less Franciscan.
Well, it's been great talking to you all today to get your thoughts and ideas about all these topics, but it is time for us to wrap up the episode. So, Annie, do you have anything special for us today for our moment of reflection?
Yeah, so I just opened randomly before the meeting from the little book called Living and Loving by Joanna de Ângelis through the mediumship of Divaldo Franco. And it's chapter 5, which is called Try Loving. So people raised to positions of mass leadership have always resorted to force and arbitrary domination. They paraded along the streets, crowned with transient success, carried out by delusions and intoxicated with conceit. They built up powerful empires, ruled ruthlessly, and were feathered and were feared rather than loved. The great philosophers who lived before Jesus, inspired by noble ideas, left careful instructions for self-liberation, written down in steles and ancient parchments in clay and papyri. However excellent, their teachings were unable to touch the souls of men. Jesus was a different master. No one has ever expressed the golden rule of happiness with such wisdom. He taught through living example, and his approach was always a loving one, peaceful and pacifying. By pointing out love as the base and the apex of life, he changed the very structures of ethics, culture, and civilization. Jesus set love as the turning point in history, since love is the source, the center, and the destination of all realities. In a persistent drive to conquer, man has opened up spaces only to fill them with horrors of war and desolation, waging battles and cherishing ambitions. Intoxicated with power, he spread his domination and piled up the gold. As a result, he is today tormented by huge ego sclerosis. In addition, because of well rooted old habits and pride, man has been rejecting love, which is the only prescription indicated to heal him. If you feel sad and tired of your day-to-day troubles, wrestling with all sorts of sorrows, try loving. If your load seems too heavy to bear, when you feel lonely within a crowd, when you are beaten by adversity, and it seems as if you were entangled in a hopeless maze of insanity, try loving. If you are on the verge of despair, feeling weak and lost, try loving. Whatever the circumstances, no matter how difficult the situation that confronts you, try loving. Spread love like a fertilizing pollen made of light, and love will fly back to you as peace and spiritual beauty. Never return evil for evil. Instead, do unto others as you wish others would do unto you. If you do so, you will realize that loving your neighbor is really the golden rule, the perfect solution for all human problems. Do as Jesus did, and you shall never get tired of trying love as the only answer to the challenges of life. Always try loving and continue loving until love becomes an inherent part of yourself.
Well, that's it for this episode of Insightfully Speaking. If you want to listen to any of the previous episodes, you can find them on your favourite podcast service, as well as the video versions on the Kardec Group YouTube channel. Make sure that you follow Kardec Group on social media or visit our website, kardec.org.uk, if you want to find out more information about our activities, to send us a donation, or even just to say hello. So it leaves me just to say a big thank you to my co-hosts, Anne Sinclair and Humberto Schubert, and also thank you to our guest today, Lolita Stein Johnson. My name is Adam Osborne, and I hope you can join us again next time for another episode of Insightfully Speaking.